Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots is one of the most divisive entries in the Metal Gear series. It was an exciting system seller for the PlayStation 3 back when it came out in 2008, and exciting for fans because it promised to be an epic finale for the series with all the questions answered. However, today, almost 20 years later, opinions are pretty split on MGS4. Some think it's a masterpiece, some think it's a flawed masterpiece, some think it was okay, others think the game was a mistake. Personally, I used to really not like MGS4, and I think I was fine with it on my first playthrough, but then, when I did a video on it in 2019, I had an axe to grind with MGS4 and most of the later entries in this series. And this time, you don't have to take my word for it, because due to popular demand, I have relisted nearly all my older content, which includes the entire MGS retrospective. It's all back and comments are turned on and everything, so if you want to find out why I used to dislike MGS4, feel free to watch it, I guess. I haven't played MGS4 since 2019, and I didn't originally plan on it, but doing new videos in MGS 1, 2, and 3 naturally got me to think about Guns of the Patriots again. And the thoughts I was having made me feel like it was a title worth revisiting in video form. I was saying years ago how I thought MGS4 wasted so much time and potential on fan service and answering questions and providing answers that I found woefully unsatisfying, but I don't know. I was just thinking about MGS4 the other week and found myself looking back pretty fondly on the experience, to my surprise. So that's when I knew I needed to play it again to explore if I still feel kinder towards this game after a full playthrough. But in order to do it, I needed the right setup. MGS4 is a game that came out on PlayStation 3 in 2008. In past videos, I've gone over this many times, that this era of games might be the worst one when it comes to how games ran on consoles. HD graphics were new at the time, and developers were pushing the visuals of their games more than ever before, and these consoles, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, just couldn't keep up. In MGS4's case, the game ran like ass on original hardware. The game is focused on a lot of war zones, so explosions will be going off on the regular, and so the game will start chugging like nobody's business in these moments. The inconsistent frame rate made it more difficult for me to enjoy the gameplay of MGS4 compared to playing the previous games. MGS2 on PlayStation 2 was a stable 60 FPS, and MGS3's original version was a stable 30, when MGS4 was going up and down in frame rate nearly all the time. That was more tolerable back in 2008, but today makes for a really janky play experience. So that was always counting against MGS4. I wanted to see what I could do to level the playing field. Today, my computer is pretty powerful, and I know that the PS3 emulator, RPCS3, is constantly being worked on and improved. So I went on YouTube to see if MGS4 in 60 FPS from start to finish was possible, and I found this video that goes over the right setup, and I can confirm it absolutely works. I got 60 FPS MGS4 here, and I played it from start to finish. There are moments where textures like screens have a freakout, but the gameplay is solid from start to finish. Only issue I could report having was a soft lock in the tank chase from Act 2, but that was the only issue I ran into on the gameplay front. Having stable 60 FPS gameplay makes the game more enjoyable from the jump, even if my PC sounded like it was about to blow for almost the entire game. This segment might not age super well since the MGS Master Collection Volume 2 is probably going to come out in the next year or two and will likely include MGS4 and hopefully have none of these issues, but for now, this is as good as it gets. I can't wait to get a proper PC version of this game. It'll be very interesting to see how they go about it though, because the game is so riddled with product placement from Apple that I wonder if they just rename and retexture some stuff or if they'd pay the fees to have those products in again. Only time will tell. Anyway, MGS3 and Portable Ops were prequels meant to flesh out the character of Big Boss. But MGS4 returns to the present-day plotline and shows us what happened to Solid Snake and Raiden and the state of the world post-MGS2. This game picks up 5 years later in 2014. The Patriots AI still controls the world and has created a new war economy where conflict fuels further conflict and that drives up profit worldwide. In his opening monologue, Snake says that war is no longer about nations or ideologies, but just an endless series of battles between rebels and private military companies dishing out weapons of mass destruction on the daily. Snake is in the Middle East because Liquid Ocelot is finally ready to unveil his grand plan to end the Patriots and take over the world. So Snake, in his final mission, is tasked with killing Liquid Ocelot before it's too late. I say final mission because Snake has to contend with Liquid and the state of the world, but also his failing body. The clones of Big Boss weren't programmed to live long, so despite Snake only being 42 years old, his DNA is set to age rapidly and now he has the body of a 70-year-old. So he needs to kill Liquid before his body fails completely, thus setting up the journey of MGS4. When diving into the gameplay of Guns of the Patriots, there's a lot to appreciate about it. I personally don't have an issue with the controls of MGS3, but they are a bit of a learning curve. They essentially had the same controls as MGS2, but the differing terrain and more reactive gameplay made the controls of 3 feel stiffer on the first playthrough. MGS4 feels really good to control. You used the analog sticks to move around in MGS 1, 2, and 3, but the analog controls feel smoother and more responsive in MGS4. Plus, they've enhanced little things like having a button to press for clinging to walls instead of just being on contact. It is just harder to make mistakes in MGS4 or have the game misread your intentions. Then, MGS4 really enhanced many of the new systems introduced in MGS3 like the stamina bar. MGS4 introduces the psych meter where the more stressed out old Snake gets, the harder it will be to play the game. Managing that is crucial. And it becomes more difficult the more you play on the higher difficulties, and therefore you have to make little decisions, like you can use the syringes to automatically restore your psych meter, but you don't want to build a dependency on them. But other items that replenish that meter also fill up your health, so you don't want to waste those items in the event you might not need both meters topped off. It encourages good gameplay. But the biggest win is the camo system. In MGS3, you need to open up a slow menu to change the camo, but with the power of the PlayStation 3, MGS4 lets you change camo with Snake's new Octo Camo suit. Simply connect with a wall or the ground for a few seconds and Snake will automatically camouflage to that texture. This works amazingly well and is still visually impressive to this day that there's just a camo for virtually every single texture in the game. The gunplay in CQC was also improved. MGS4 released in a post-Resident Evil 4 world, so every third-person action game copied that over-the-shoulder person shooting setup. MGS4 adds to the mix by letting Snake move while aiming in this mode and includes interesting dodge mechanics where you can jump forward and backward into the sides. I feel like accuracy is difficult with some of the rapid-fire weapons, however you get upgrades that increase the stability of those guns, so it can be worked with. MGS3's gunplay is a bit unorthodox, but it was fun to work with when you really dug into it. However, I can't say MGS4 wasn't an improvement in handling. The third-person shooting works well, and you can still switch to the first-person aiming from MGS2 and 3, only with the ability to move while aiming and shooting. So it has the best of all worlds. CQC works similarly to Snake Eater, only now doing it feels more intuitive and making pressure-sensitive mistakes like stabbing a dude when you wanted to grab him can't happen since it's now linked to a button press. So when you look at the gameplay of MGS3 and MGS4, it's pretty clear to see that MGS4 is an improvement on virtually all the systems introduced in 3. But what I got really immersed in this time was Battlefield Stealth. If I remember correctly, in that video from almost 7 years ago, I said that I thought the idea was appealing, but I didn't like the execution as I got frustrated with it more often than not and the game gave up on it after like 2 levels. But this time, I felt a lot more positively about it. I was still a victim to getting blown up when I least expected it, but still, it works pretty well and can be a lot of fun. Otacon encourages Snake to not get involved in these conflicts and stick to sneaking, but if you help the rebels against the PMC troops, they will not attack you if they see you. This can really help, like in Act 1. There's a part where you have to sneak through a rebel hideout. If you've been an ally to the rebels up to that point, you can just walk through here without any trouble, but if you didn't, they go on high alert the moment they see you and fight with you. Totally optional to fight with the rebels, you could instead save ammo and keep moving, but I decided to get really into it this time and it paid off. In Act 2, I just felt like an action movie badass as I was leading the troops on the mission. This game has a shop system where you can buy all kinds of weapons and upgrades and ammo on the spot. So I had an M4 with a suppressor and a scope and a thing to stabilize my aiming, so I was just blasting the enemies away. The PMCs didn't see it coming and the rebels were able to win the battle. I was just kind of playing MGS4 like a regular military action game at this point, and I had a blast with it in Act 2 especially. But you can fuse stealth action gameplay with it, like when I found a good vantage point and became a team sniper. It was a ton of fun. What I really didn't like about MGS4 back in 2019 was how it didn't feature a lot of the weird stuff from MGS3. You know, the list of bizarre features I've gone over every time. The croc cap, the fake death pills, the gas spray, poisoning enemies with trapped animals, tactical reloads, and so on and so forth. However, I feel like I was not being fair to this game at all. Now, tactical reloads, I still missed those. Reloading weapons mid-gunfight was annoying to me when the other games didn't have that at all when you knew what a tactical reload was. But still, I think the issue was my MGS3 fandom was at its peak then, and I was basically just annoyed that MGS4 wasn't MGS3 2. Guns of the Patriots is not Snake Eater. It comes with its own ideas and gimmicks that are worth looking at and engaging with on its own level, like Battlefield Stealth, and its own weird things too, like an oil drum you can roll around in. I distinctly remember not being able to rapid fire the trank gun when I played this game for the review and being kind of happy about it, because then it could be added to my list of evidence against the game. Basically, I started with the conclusion I didn't like the game and went backwards looking for the evidence, which is not ideal. That's not to say I think MGS4 is as good as MGS3, I don't. I think MGS3 just comes together in a far more satisfying way than MGS4, but this game's gameplay is pretty good. The issue I have with MGS4 is, for one, the action set pieces. In Act 1, Snake and Rat Patrol Team 10 need to fight through a horde of frog soldiers to get out of the building. In theory, it's a fine gameplay idea, but in practice, I just think all these troops are bullet sponges, so it really overstays its welcome by the end, especially because of how you need to keep pace with the Rat Patrol. When I was going solo, taking people down on my own, but had to keep going back to help the team several floors up. I didn't even notice they weren't behind me because I was just focusing on shooting. Games like Uncharted have sections like this pretty often, but a cover shooting set piece like this in a Metal Gear game feels like a pace breaker. Act 2 has something similar, where you get this long tank chase scene. My preference for these games is just when you can take your own path through and react to whatever tense situations come up along the way. But then a segment like this just feels really one note. I just think the gunplay of MGS4 works better in the battlefield stealth area than it does in straight up shooting sequences. And that's a shame, because the second major issue I have with MGS4 that keeps it well below 3 for me is how the amount of stealth action really goes down the more you play it. Acts 1 and 2 do the battlefield stealth thing, but then Act 3 is a tailing mission where you follow a guy to Big Mama's house. I actually feel like this part is kinda neat. You haven't really roamed an urban area in the Metal Gear series before, so it feels fresh, but if you stick to following the guy, it might feel boring. But then you get another chase scene which looks cool, but doesn't feel great because this level doesn't have a lot of that fun stealth action I was looking for. Then when you return to Shadow Moses Island in Act 4, Snake just contends with robots that I've always struggled to sneak by, so I was just shooting them all with a machine gun and just buy nearly infinite ammo for it. Act 5 begins in the caution state, so it's more of a mad dash to get to the GW AI before you get overwhelmed by the frog troopers and Gecko. I didn't not like Acts 3, 4, and 5. I enjoyed all of them at various moments. I just thought Act 2 really nailed a perfect balance between stealth and combat, and then the other three that followed it weren't as well balanced. But that's really it. Those are my only major gripes with the gameplay of MGS4, and they're issues that fall under the "your mileage may vary" category. So looking back several years later, I think MGS4 is a fun game. I can see myself revisiting it in the future, especially to play Acts 1 and 2, since they provide a unique experience you can't really get in other MGS games. But of course, the story is the thing that gets more discourse than the gameplay. MGS4 has far more cutscenes than gameplay, so it was only natural. My original video focused a lot on the story as well, but to just dive into it, MGS4's plot is the most convoluted in the series, and it's almost the trademark of the game. And it's not because the plot really needed to be so complicated, it's far more because this game really doubles down in the worst issue of MGS2, which was the lengthy scenes of Raiden being told information in codec screens. MGS4 is similar, although now the codec has a pretty small role in the game. Instead, cutscenes will become slideshows with characters explaining systems and nanomachines for 10 minutes a pop. But honestly, I tend to tune these parts out or skip them on the replay. My problem with the story of MGS4 when playing it now is just that I dislike how in love the game is with itself as far as the series lore is concerned. MGS4 intended to answer all the questions you could possibly have about the Metal Gear saga, and I mean all of them. That's why the scenes run for so long a lot of the time. Like how, in order to protect Raiden's son from the Patriots, Campbell got into a fake marriage with Rose, so the Patriots wouldn't go after the kid to hurt or manipulate Raiden, which contributes to Raiden's depression in his new robotic ninja form as he's kept in the dark about it. But Campbell also has to maintain the act even when talking to Snake, and so Meryl now hates him thinking he swooped in on a younger woman when he saw the opportunity. But they mend their issues after the game is over and Meryl gets married to the pants pooper who's been a running gag in every game up to this point. This is a side plot, and yet it's already fusing so many characters and plot lines from previous games into one really complicated pie. This is something MGS4 does a lot. I mean, who turned Raiden into a robot? Well, Dr. Madnar, of course, who is still alive almost 20 years after his appearance in Zanzibar Land. The time where Snake shot him in the back with rockets, I might add. Just because Raiden's robotic state needed to be explained and done by a pre-established character who hasn't been seen or thought about since the fucking 8-bit games. But those were just side plot examples. Obviously, the main plot version is the reveal in Act 3 that Big Boss and his support team from MGS3 were the ones who founded the Patriots. I spent a long time on this scene in the 2019 video because I found this twist to be so implausible and unacceptable and was the thing that killed the series narratively. I don't believe that anymore, because much of my argument rested on the idea that I simply didn't buy into Zero and Paramedic and crew becoming such world-dominating bad guys, but the explanation makes enough sense. That the crew that became the Patriots were trying to honor the boss's vision of a unified world, and naturally that led to different interpretations of what that meant. For Zero, it was about a unified system of information control and dissemination, and for Big Boss, it meant soldiers not being under the control of politics. They parted ways and began to feud. That makes sense. People change. Just because Zero might have been a fun ally for Snake in 1964 doesn't mean he can't become somebody else entirely decades into the future. Or really, doesn't mean we knew all about him to begin with that would tell us that he wasn't up to shady shit at the time. When I play MGS3 now, I don't even talk to Zero and Paramedic and Sigint at all, so they mean very little to me when playing the game. So why would I spend time of my life being mad that Paramedic 35 years later turned Gray Fox into the cyborg ninja? She liked movies and helped Snake in 1964. That's all you really have to know about her to play MGS3. That doesn't mean she couldn't have become a bad person and experiment on people decades later. She doesn't really have much character to ruin, is what I'm saying. Something that I, from 6 years ago, needed to accept is that just because you don't personally like how a plot developed doesn't mean the road there was poorly done or not properly justified in the story. Playing the games again in 2025, my issue is much less to do with what happened and far more to do with wishing we had more of it. Eva explains to Snake the falling out of Big Boss and Zero and what happened as a result of it. But can you imagine how good the scenes would be if we instead got to watch the fallout? Like, imagine we listened to the debates over the boss between the two that led to the fallout. Especially once Big Boss learned that Zero cloned him without consent. This is one of the biggest missed opportunities in the entire Metal Gear saga. That this pivotal moment, the fallout of Zero and Big Boss, is just something that happened off-screen. So we'll just never know how it went down and can only hear about it from the perspective of an observer decades after the fact. But show don't tell is the greatest flaw of the Metal Gear saga in general, like I've said. This is another reason why I wish MGS3 showed the boss's relationship with the characters. Like, MGS3 doesn't even give you a reason to believe Zero cares about the boss at all, because he tells Snake to just shut up and kill her at the start of Operation Snake Eater.
In terms of sheer technique, I'll never be able to beat her. I know that all too well.
You've got to do it, Snake. She's your enemy and your objective.
Enemy? We were together for 10 years, and now you tell me she's my enemy?
Enough.
So a scene in the past of them all being friends would have done wonders for the saga as a whole. But my larger problem with MGS4 writing its story like this is that it goes about world building in a way I don't really care for. I like world building that makes the universe feel bigger. I think tying everything up in an ongoing story into one singular conspiracy makes the entire series feel really small. Especially when that was never planned in the first place. Because now, who are the Patriots? They're the good guys from MGS3. Why did they make the Patriots? Because they wanted to achieve the vision of the boss. Why did Big Boss create Outer Heaven and Zanzibar Land? Well, before, we thought it was because he was an evil dude with nukes who wanted a nation for soldiers, but now, he was trying to achieve the dream of his deceased mentor, but also, Eva explains that with Metal Gear TX55 and Metal Gear D, Big Boss was also fighting against Zero and his AI network, and when Solid Snake was sent to Outer Heaven and Zanzibar in Metal Gear 1 and 2, he was unknowingly acting out the designs of the Patriot AI. Every event in the timeline is because of the Patriots, who are characters from MGS3. You know what I mean? I'm just saying it makes the world feel a lot smaller when everything that happens is one giant snowball conspiracy. Especially since the games need to trip over themselves in retcons to make it make sense. But like I said, I don't really beef with this scene as is anymore. I think the idea of it is fine enough, and the explanation makes sense. I just wish we got to see it, and from a preference point of view, I don't think tying everything together is great world building. I don't think it was this scene that was the point of no return for MGS. I think that was the intro to Liquid Ocelot in MGS2, like I said in that video. I think MGS4 was trying to make the best of that plot beat. You know, here Ocelot replaced Liquid's arm with a robot arm, so now we don't have that Liquid controls Ocelot via his arm thing anymore. But then Ocelot's actor, Patrick Zimmerman, does all the lines for Liquid Ocelot in MGS4, instead of having Liquid's voice actor Cam Clark come back to be Liquid in this. I was going to say that was an attempt at backtracking MGS2's Liquid possession plot, but not quite. In the Japanese version, Liquid's voice actor still did the lines in MGS4. The US localizers decided to make it Ocelot's. I don't mind that though, because Patrick Zimmerman turns in one of the best villain performances in the Metal Gear series in this game, hamming it up as the villain when he needs to, but also being a credible threat as well. But I do still believe MGS4 backtracks MGS2 somewhat. In Sons of Liberty, it really was a plot point that Ocelot was taken over by Liquid's arm. The game unironically given us that dog shit on a silver platter, all because they wanted to backtrack Liquid's death since they thought more could have been done with that character. MGS3 gave people the idea that Ocelot inherited spiritual powers from his father, the Sorrow, but then Big Boss explains in MGS4 that it was actually a triple ruse and that Ocelot had used psychotherapy on himself to make himself believe he was genuinely Liquid Snake and fool the Patriots into thinking Liquid was actually back. And I'm like, okay, game, that's the plot now. Just forget all that I live on through this arm shit. And yeah, maybe that's for the best. But what I've come to realize in recent time is that it's not like MGS4 or the MGS series as a whole are wrong in how they tell their stories. I was recently talking to an old friend of mine who got into these games as I was getting out of them in 2019, and he phrased it as though the style of storytelling in MGS just doesn't really appeal to me anymore. And that made sense to me. I don't inherently think something is wrong with how MGS tells its story, I just find other, more character-driven narratives more interesting at this point in my life than a big series with lore and interconnected plot threads. I have issues with how the games were done, that much has been made evident in the last few videos, but again, I don't think it's inherently bad most of the time, just not something I am as engaged with as I was a decade ago. And that's okay. I still have fun rewatching these stories and re-experiencing the lore, which is why I'm talking about it. Having said that, I do wish MGS4 had focused more on its unique themes than the lore stuff, because I think there's a lot of compelling content within MGS4 that I want to talk about. I just really dig Old Snake as a premise. Solid Snake is still one of my all-time favorite video game protagonists. He's been through a lot, and seeing him go through the ringer as an old man, a product of genetic circumstance, is hard to watch in all the right ways. He's still funny and awkward and entirely selfless, and still gets moments of badassery, but is fighting against his body this time, and it's really interesting to see that play out during the game. And it also plays into the themes of the story really well. How the times have completely changed, war has changed, and so have video games. So what better way to highlight that than dragging Solid Snake out for another mission? The mascot of the series who's been around since the first game from 1987. MGS4 came out over 20 years later, so now he's old and out of place in this new mission with the war economy and souped-up nanomachines. Snake's old age is justified in universe, but it also feels symbolically appropriate for MGS4's place in the evolving gaming industry. All the social commentary about war in video games really hits now that I'm playing MGS4 with fresher eyes. Again, I just wish the game focused more on this than explaining systems and nanomachines. MGS4 exists in a fictional world where tiny Metal Gears called Gecko jump around the battlefield killing people, but it's the culture surrounding war in the world of MGS4 that's relevant and was at the time of the game's release. The war economy is a pretty good reflection of what America is, since we spend more money on weapons and hardware than most other developed nations combined. MGS4 plays it up to an extreme degree. Right at the beginning, you get several minutes of unskippable in-universe ads. They're written and styled like ads for regular products we buy in the real world, only they're promoting weapons of mass destruction and private military companies. The Patriots need the American populace in favor of their war economy, so it's framed as protecting people around the globe, which is a justification that's been used for military conflict countless times over the decades. But then there's also military recruitment ads in this scene that are also packaged like DVD dance classes or something. That sounds like it's crazy, but it isn't really that unrealistic when comparing it to what actually exists. In Act 3, Eva tells Snake about how FPS games are distributed by PMC companies for free and they're used as the ultimate brainwashing for military recruitment. This isn't even heightened reality, it's just real life. Well, except the part where the games are free. That would never happen, that's not high-U capitalism.
Nowadays, anyone with a computer can get combat training. The FPS games that these children love are distributed for free by these companies. Of course, it's all just virtual training. It's so easy for them to get absorbed by these war games. And before they know it, they're in the PMCs holding real guns. These kids end up fighting in proxy wars that have nothing to do with their own lives. They think it's cool to fight like this.
But really though, FPS games being effective military recruitment propaganda is not new in the slightest. The armed forces have many methods of promotion, but in the realm of video games, I'm sure you've been on YouTube or Twitch or seen Marine Corps or Army ads that look just like a video game. The Army has a COD esports team. The goal is to make the armed forces look like a video game. That you are going to be a trained badass like the guys in the games, like a Solid Snake alongside a team of other Solid Snakes. But the danger is that this isn't real life. War is not fun, nor is it a game or an action movie. It is a thing where a lot of young people are thrown into the fire and many die to serve the interests of people who don't really care about them, which was something MGS3 was trying to explore with the relationship between Snake and the boss. But the whole idea of war as a video game was also a central element of MGS2 as well.
I've had extensive training, the kind that's indistinguishable from the real thing.
Like what?
Sneaking missions 60, weapons 80, advanced,
VR, huh?
but realistic in every way.
A virtual grunt of the digital age, that's just great.
That's far more effective than live exercises.
You don't get injured in VR, do you? Every year a few soldiers die in field exercises.
There's pain sensation in VR and even a sense of reality and urgency. The only difference is it isn't actually happening.
That's the way they want you to think, to remove you from the fear that goes with battle situations. War is a video game. What better way to raise the ultimate soldier?
Speaking as a kid who was in JROTC in high school, I was met with a lot of military recruitment calls and emails after graduating. I never responded to those, nor did I take the program very seriously when I was in high school, but seeing all the ways in which they try to get people who have less money to sign up and potentially give their lives or endure PTSD so they can have the chance at free college is why MGS4 hits different for me now. Now, the Metal Gear series can't quite claim it has no role in it. I mean, Every game in the MGS series has a nearly fetishistic relationship with guns and other military hardware, and Peace Walker and The Phantom Pain being games where the goal is to make as much profit off of war as you can. Which you could say was the point, given that Big Boss was meant to be on his road to villainy by then. However, both games still see Snake save the world from a catastrophe, so you never really have to think too hard about his ethics while playing the game. It was only in Ground Zeroes where I felt like Big Boss explicitly was doing shady things on screen. But I'm getting off subject. The point is, I'm giving MGS credit for talking about these things in a way most other games of its ilk don't. But really though, what is it about MGS4 that I've come to respect more over time? What changed about how I think about MGS4 that made me make the video? The things about gameplay and the war economy were elements I thought up after playing it again. What struck me about this game while replaying in the earlier games was how I thought, you know, games this good don't really get made by accident. And what do I mean? Well, it's pretty simple. When I zoom out and focus on MGS4 on the macro scale, forget what I think or thought about Major Zero's heel turn or Raiden being a robot or whatever, it's just that MGS4 is a great game in every aspect that really counts to me. The gameplay is some of the best stealth action controls that existed on the market in 2008. The graphics are stellar and still hold up to this day. The cinematography is some of the best to ever grace the gaming industry. Like, there aren't many video games that have hand-to-hand fight scenes as good as the ones in Guns of the Patriots. The game has these amazing cutscene to gameplay transitions, which weren't super common back then, as a lot of games on PS3 used pre-rendered cutscenes, when MGS4, per series tradition, kept them all in-engine and used that to their advantage in this game. And the score is really emotional. Like, you just don't make a game with qualities this great if you're phoning it in. And I really respect that effort now far more than I did back in 2019. It hit me how, just like I was saying about MGS 1 and 2, when I go a long time without playing MGS 4, I don't remember this game by how I think the level design isn't so great at the end. I don't remember this game by how its plot isn't rock solid, and it definitely isn't. But I remember this game for the moments, the experience, the emotions those moments give you. I'm always going to remember the fight between Liquid Ocelot and Old Snake as the Metal Gear Saga theme starts playing. How that transitions into this amazing boss fight that, while mechanically simplistic, hits hard because the music from MGS 1 and 2 and 3 is back and you reflect on the journey here. Or how emotional it was when Snake is in the microwave hallway and the love theme swells up while you mash the button as hard as you can to keep Snake moving while you see footage of the other characters fighting like hell to give you a chance to save the day. Or when Otacon talks about Snake to Sonny in this way at the end when he thinks Snake has made the ultimate sacrifice to save the world.
Snake had a hard life. He needs some time to rest.
Are you crying, Uncle Hal?
No. I'm not crying.
Or when the Metal Gear Saga theme swells up again when Big Boss comes back at the end and explains everything to Snake before putting an end to Zero once and for all.
We had helped turn 0 into 100. His sin was ours. And for that reason, I'm taking it upon myself to send 0 back to nothing.
Ending on the fact that Snake doesn't have to die at all, that he can live out the rest of his days in peace finally. No game on the market had moments that good. And why is that? Because MGS4 had the balls to be the final chapter. It wasn't the last Metal Gear game, nor was it the last Metal Gear Solid game, but as far as Kojima Productions games were concerned, MGS4 was the ending. MGS4 is very in love with itself and the series lore and is pretty self-indulgent. And while that's not really my style, I feel like they earned the right to do it. I find many scenes in MGS4 unwatchably boring, in fact, but the game gives focus to every character we've ever had thus far, and the game has an hour-long ending. And that's just so committed to the bit, I have to respect it. By this point, MGS was the premier storytelling game franchise, and it was a story fans were following for 10 years. I think they earned the right to do a big payoff and a big send-off to everyone's favorite characters. Not all ongoing series have the balls to end. In fact, most popular franchises don't. The MCU nosedived in popularity after the one with End in the title made $1 billion at the box office. People debate the quality of these later movies all the livelong day, but what I hear from the casuals more than anything is, I don't know, I got a good ending out of Endgame and was only interested in a couple of the other movies after that. And that shows us that there's a fundamental truth of storytelling. All stories must end. Endings are usually not my favorite part of the story, but part of what makes a story good is having an ending that can allow us to reflect on the journey here and see what was gained and learned and what could be applied to our own lives. They really could have just sent a young Solid Snake on an endless series of action-adventure stories with some new crazy Metal Gear in each one, which would have led to diminishing returns, of course, but no, MGS4 wanted to be a grand final chapter where the Patriots AI set up an MGS2 would be defeated, Solid Snake's character arc would reach a conclusion, so would everyone else's. And I guess I just respect the ambition of MGS4 more than anything else. And that's how I'm going to choose to remember this game. Not for long monologues about nanomachines, but by the fact that it had the balls to go places most other popular franchises wouldn't dare at the height of their popularity. I don't think MGS4 is a fantastic game that I'm going to play over and over when this video is done, but it is a game I respect. And I thought it was worth making a new video saying as much. Which is all I really have to say about it now. Some have asked me about re-reviewing MGS5 and Peace Walker and Portable Ops and Rising and all that, but I just didn't do it because I don't feel like I have a lot to say about many of those games. Sure, the videos would be very different from what I made years ago, and that's obvious, but with MGS 1, 2, 3, and now 4, I feel like I had something to say and I wanted to explore with each one. When for something like MGS5, it would just be, yeah, story's kinda whacked but interesting in some ways, and the game is one of the most fun games ever made and you aren't driving to waypoints. Which is basically what I said 6 years ago, just done in the style of a video I made back then. Doesn't really feel like an exciting project, you know? But that doesn't mean this is my last Metal Gear video. If you were hoping I'd talk about all those games again, worry not, because my next video will be the grand finale of the Metal Gear Revisited series, which I think will be a fun watch for any fan of Metal Gear Solid. It's going to be a huge video, so I hope everyone checks that out when it comes out in roughly a week's time. But until that moment comes, I'll close the video by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.